Welcome to our podcast. Let's recap our story thus far. In 2002, Ted Price had been on the outs with his ex-girlfriend, Catherine. She was living in Arizona with her two children, 14-year-old Maria and 10-year-old Wesley, and he was in Utah and trying to begin school to study radiology.
In November of 2002, against the advice of his friends and family, Ted got on a bus from Utah to Arizona to try to finish the schooling down there, but also mend things with his girlfriend, Kat, and return to his role as a father figure to her kids.
When Ted's family didn't hear from him for weeks, they became worried, and their worries were justified when they were notified that his dead body had been discovered in the Arizona desert. The Price family heard the sad news on the night before New Year's Eve. They were in disbelief. Here's Ted's sister, Karen, to tell us about it. Did it ever occur to you that he might have been killed?
No. I mean, that's just fantasy life. That's what you see on the Monday night movie of the week. It doesn't happen to people that you know. So they found his body on the 10th of December. They did not notify my mother until the 30th of December. So he's been missing now for more than a month. It's just a crazy time. And they had done an autopsy. That's how they figured out who he was. And then they put his body on ice, or whatever they would call it. And they shipped his body to Utah so that we could bury him. And they put him, you've seen those coffins that they use for like military people. You know, they look like little bullets, sort of. His body came in that kind of a coffin and went to Myers Mortuary, where my whole family gets buried. And Sheila and I told the guy at Myers Mortuary that we wanted to come and see his body. And he refused to open it. He said, that is not something that you want to have. What you want to remember.
In the days following the identification of Ted Price's body, the Maricopa County Sheriff's detectives begin their investigation.
The investigation runs Ted's name through various databases, trying to find out who this person is, his last known address, and they're finally able to locate an address in the Aspen Apartments in Mesa, Arizona.
And among their first interviews at the apartment complex is the maintenance manager, a man named Russell.
Right. And the detectives get lucky. Russell actually knew Ted Price and his ex-girlfriend, Kat. He says they were friends for about 5 years up until he moved out. Russell says he had personally lived in the complex for approximately 7 years. And he said his son and Catherine's son, Wesley, were friends.
Now, the police push Russell to get an idea of what Ted and Catherine's home life was like. It turns out it wasn't all roses.
He says that Ted didn't get along with Catherine's teenage daughter, Maria, which we've heard before, remember?
Oh, right.
Yeah, he says the police were called to the apartment on numerous occasions due to physical and verbal arguments between Ted and Maria.
Right. And according to Russell, the arguments between Ted and Maria were due to the fact that Catherine allowed Maria to use drugs, have sex, and generally not adhere to any household rules.
Maria's behavioral problems were something that we are familiar with because we've heard them from the other family. But keep in mind, this is the beginning of investigation, and police are starting from scratch, so they need this information. We know what the police were doing because we've gone through thousands of pages of police reports to find out exactly how the investigation went.
Right. Well, Russell says that according to Ted, this was the crux of a rift between Ted and Kat. So Kat raised her children as if she were a friend rather than a parent.
Right. Right. So Russell tells the police that the friction between Ted and Maria got pretty serious on one occasion. The police were actually called to the apartment complex, and Ted had a baseball bat in his hand. When he refused to drop the bat, the police actually shot him with a beanbag to hold him.
Yeah, that had to hurt.
Well, that also suggests Ted may have had a bit of a temper,
Maybe.
or obstinate.
Or both. Right. So it was after this that Kat and her kids moved out of the complex and into another building called the Village Inn at the Pines Apartments. Right? And so I guess that's probably when Ted returned to Utah. So Russell says that Catherine has a brother by the name of JT who lives in Mesa. Now Russell says that JT looks Hispanic and he thinks he might have a drinking problem.
So Russell also tells the detectives that he thinks Kat might have been dating some guy who he hears is a drug dealer. White guy, mid-30s, light brown hair, but he doesn't know his name.
So as the police are wrapping up the interview, they come clean and tell Russell that Ted has been killed. And they ask him if there's anyone he thinks might want to harm Ted.
Russell tells the police that he doesn't think Catherine would do anything to harm Ted, but that they should look at Maria, and maybe it's Kat's brother JT. So he's giving a couple of names there.
Okay, so investigators now have a growing list of suspects, right? We got Maria, we got JT,
And Catherine. Maybe.
and some mysterious white guy who hangs around with light brown hair,
Yeah.
right? Who is purportedly a drug dealer.
Mm-hmm.
That could be interesting,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So here's the question. Maria is 14 years old. Is she even a viable suspect,
Sure.
really?
Of course.
I mean, do we think a 14-year-old is capable of... So she doesn't have a driver's license, right? So she
How did
couldn't
you get him to the desert?
Right. So if she is a viable suspect, she has an accomplice.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
I mean, everyone is really kind of a suspect.
Right.
Right. So, I mean, we've kind of got four people right now. Kat, Maria, Kat's brother, JT, and some mysterious, light brown drug dealer, right?
Okay.
And I wonder if that guy and JT are the same, but I guess Russell would have known. Right?
Yeah, because he knew JT.
Right.
Yeah. All right.
All right, so police now go over to the Village Inn at the Pines, where Kat has moved. And they believe Kat and her children are living there now.
At that complex, they find Catherine at her apartment. Now, remember, they're investigating a murder, so the police are careful what information they want to give out, what they want to inform her of.
Right. In fact, they don't tell Catherine that Ted's dead. They just say he's missing and that they're trying to locate him.
Right. Yeah. So according to the police reports, they actually told Kat that Ted had gotten into a fight with a woman and they were trying to find him and get to the bottom of what happened. She says that recently they had parted ways, but he was coming to Arizona from Utah to attend radiology school, which
we know.
We knew, and he wanted to stay with her for a while, and while he got himself set up.
And of course, she was trying to do good by him and let him stay there. But it didn't really go according to plan.
Right. Catherine says that Ted's school funding didn't come through. So on the 10th day of her stay, she told him he had to get out. He had to leave.
Right. She says that Ted refused to leave, and they argued. She threatened to call the police if Ted didn't leave immediately.
She says that eventually he did leave. And she thinks this was around November 22nd.
Right. And she says he's carrying a purple-colored duffel bag. Mm-hmm. But he just walked out the door, and she had no idea where he was going. Most likely, she said he's on a bus back to Utah.
It's at this point that the police decide to change gears. They actually tell her that Ted is dead, that he is deceased, and that they are, in fact, conducting a death investigation.
And of course, Kat replies that she had wished him dead on numerous occasions, but she didn't actually want that to happen to him. Right? She maintains that he walked out the door, presumably to get on a bus, and Ted's mom even called her a couple of times looking for him, but she didn't know what happened.
At this initial interview with Kat, she basically says that she doesn't know what happened to him after he left. But after their initial interview with Kat, Police follow up with her in some bank documents, and Kat is a little more forthcoming about the day Ted left.
Right. So here's lead detective Seagraves talking about it in court.
Ted Price left on his own willingly. She said that they were having an argument, and she asked him, you didn't get your loan, so you can't stay here anymore. And at some point he said, I'm not leaving. And she had a cordless phone in her hand, and she threw it at him. It hit the bridge of his nose, causing blood to get on the furniture. He was sitting on a couch, and there was a table in front of him, like a sofa table, and he kind of fell on the ground and got blood on the ground as well. And so that general area, she said that he just was bleeding there.
So that day and in the days following their initial contact with Catherine, the police visit her apartment, and the state of her apartment is notable.
There were numerous people inside the apartments. People were sleeping on the floors. People were sleeping on the bed. There were people coming and going all hours of the night. We tried to get as many names of the individuals that were there, but as we were talking, there were so many of them that they were just kind of running out before we even had a chance to make contact with them.
Police try and get people's identification so they can document for the case who's coming and going from that apartment, but it's difficult.
Right. For police, it's obvious that this is a drug den. People come and go to buy and use drugs.
So, what do you think about the police believing Kat's story? That she didn't know, told him to leave, and he just walks out the door.
I mean, it's kind of hard to believe, right? So they were together for 9 or 10 years, and then he comes back from Utah, and she lets him stay there, and then he just up and leaves without telling her where he's going, or... I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't seem reasonable.
Yeah, I can imagine if they have an argument and he walks out the door, but then most likely come back, get his stuff.
I mean,
You have a plan, tell her, okay, I'm leaving, I'm going to take a bus, but this sounds a little odd.
Yeah, her story,
There's some pieces missing.
yeah, her story doesn't really make sense. I mean, why would he go back to Utah, right? I mean, he didn't only go to Arizona to get back with her. He was enrolled in school there.
Right.
Now, granted, perhaps he didn't get the funding or the funding wasn't available in time, but you would think that he would stick around in Arizona. Not, he was there for 10 years. He must have friends, somebody he could go stay with or something.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't clear if she knew he was going back to Utah. Was she?
No, she said she assumes he went back to Utah again on a bus.
Yeah.
But she doesn't know what happened to him.
Right.
Right? How convenient, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess she said bus because that's how he arrived.
That is how he arrived.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I wonder, was there still tension in the household over the kids and the way Kat was parenting?
And the drugs.
Well, there could be tension because of the drugs too. But we know that there was tension because of the daughter at least, and that's what made them break up to begin with. Well, I can tell you, when Karen hears about the conditions at Kat's house, she is very surprised.
That it was filthy, that there were many, many people living there, that Wesley said that he was not going to school because he couldn't sleep at night because there were people having sex in his bed. And I mean, I never thought that Kat was a good mother, but that was beyond anything that I would imagine. And even though Kat wasn't a great mother, she was a good housekeeper. Like, you could eat off the woman's floor. So to hear that she was living in what Seagraves called a flop house, it was kind of shocking. And then she said, well, it's because she's on meth. And that just blew me away. I mean, Ted and Kat drank alcohol. They smoked cigarettes. They didn't do drugs at all. And so I couldn't understand how Kat would be doing meth and Ted would be like involved in that. Certainly Ted wasn't doing meth. And she said it was something that Kat got involved with after she and Ted broke up. And so now you start to question, well, maybe the fact that he got murdered had something to do with Kat and the meth, right? I mean, we still didn't have any idea, but I think that the police really felt like the murder tied back to Kat and that apartment and the people that were coming and going from that apartment. It still seemed very, I don't know, impossible to us because, again, Kat might not have been a good mother, but we didn't see her as like a horrible person necessarily. That certainly she didn't kill Ted. That would be unlikely. But maybe somebody that she knew did. So that was the first time that we ever really thought of that.
In the days following their initial contact with Kat and her apartment, Kat sticks to her story that Ted left to return home, and she hasn't seen him since. What's more, none of the people coming or going from the house seem to know anything about Ted's death.
But there is one person that police feel should know more, and even though there's plenty of people coming and going from the apartment, there is a woman who lives there. It's Catherine's roommate, a woman called Michelle. There's several people apparently not only coming and going, but actually living there.
Living there, right. Well, on January 7th, the detectives get a chance to sit down with Michelle at the sheriff's office.
Michelle tells the police that she's lived in a couple of different places with Catherine. She says that she's a nurse's assistant with a certification, but she doesn't have a job. And she doesn't have a job because she doesn't have reliable transportation,
Right.
which kind of makes sense if you can't get to work.
Yeah. Michelle does say that she received some cash assistance to support her and her 2-year-old, a daughter, who currently lives with Michelle's mom, but Michelle has visitations.
According to Michelle, the apartment she shared with Catherine was a 2-bedroom apartment. She says that the sleeping arrangements were a little odd, often changed. However, as a norm, Catherine and her daughter, Maria, would share a bedroom, while she shared a second bedroom with her own daughter, Emily, and Catherine's son, Wesley.
Right. So Michelle is having some struggles of her own, right?
Yeah.
But she does seem to be genuine when she's speaking to the police.
Right. So Michelle tells police what the arrangement was with Ted sleeping on the couch, because he's staying there too, and was ironing out his school situation.
Right. She says pretty much what Kat told the police, that Ted left of his own accord and she hasn't seen him since.
At this point, investigators have a list of people who have been coming and going from the apartment. They put some pictures in front of Michelle and ask him to identify him.
So Michelle identifies various men that have been known to come and go.
Yeah.
So there's Michael Shenton, who was Maria's boyfriend, age 20, which is a little old for Maria.
Who's
right?
16?
Maria's 14.
14.
Her boyfriend is 20. And her boyfriend goes by White Mike.
Uh-huh.
Right?
Yep.
His brother, Brandon, also comes and goes. His father, Richard Shenton, her boyfriend's father. Kat's brother, Isedra, also known as JT, and another guy who goes by the name of Gunch. Now, she admits that this is his nickname, but according to her, none of these men had vehicles. They all arrived on foot.
Right. So this is something the detectives have to note. If they're investigating any of these guys as potential suspects in Ted Price's death, a vehicle would have to be necessary, an aspect of the murder. So Ted's body was found, like we said before, in the middle of nowhere, and a vehicle had to bring him out there, even just to dump it. It would be essential.
All right, be absolutely essential. Well, with nothing pointing to Michelle as a possible murderer or conspirator, police thank her for her time and let her go on her way.
Right. So going with the vehicle theory, police locate Kat's car. It's recently been repossessed. Fits in with the rest of the story of how they live. If they're thinking that she's involved, more than likely she'd have to use the car to get rid of the body.
So the police bring the car to a forensic lab, and the lab tech notices several odd stains. So there's one on the dashboard, one on the passenger side door, and another on the rear passenger side door.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's one on the center console and on the floorboards. Apparently, Kat is very much a slob, right? So there's weird stains pretty much everywhere.
And they test all the stains to see if they're blood. And you know what? None of them tested positive for blood.
Right.
No.
So she's a slob, but she's not bleeding all over the inside of her car. Well, by the third week of January, it's becoming pretty clear the police are going to need to search her apartment. So they need to search it from head to toe and just try to find any forensic evidence.
Also, they need to talk to Kat's daughter, Maria.
Which, interestingly,
Yeah.
the 14-year-old girl is not living at home. She's off somewhere else, and the police can't find her. So, maybe there's something to this thing about Ted not liking the way she parented her children.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
I mean, talking about how Kat's treating her children, it was clear that Kat herself was using drugs. Although
Right.
that was something different from what Karen and Ted's family remembered
Well, right. So it was out of character for her.
for her. In fact, and the way she's treating her children, not only was she treating Maria as if she were just a buddy, but Wesley, it's noted that he was, as a Christmas present, was given meth for a Christmas present.
That's a
So,
hell of a Christmas present.
yeah, that's a hell of a mother.
We'll be right back. If you're enjoying this episode, please leave a 5-star review. They are extremely important to growing our audience and a way to support us without us asking for any money. We also value written reviews to help us know what we're doing well and areas that we can improve. We'll be sharing some of your comments on future episodes of the podcast. Thank you. So, well, listen, the police are like knee deep in this investigation right now. But what do we think? Is there anything in your mind that's promising?
Someone probably within this circle is where the police are going to be looking the most.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true. And I think the police really want to talk to Maria. So I think it's imperative that they find her.
Right. Of course, now the number of suspects, or at least the people that are coming and going, has enlarged beyond those 4 that we talked about in the past.
Right, many more than we can list right now.
Right.
Right.
So they've got to somehow investigate further and narrow it down.
But it also brings up the question, with this household the way it is, and the conditions there, and all the drugs, and all the people coming and going and flopping out there, and sleeping arrangements, weird stuff, right? Why would Ted want to stay there to begin with? I mean, he must have been desperate, really, to want to stay once he got there.
Right. Or wanted to change it, improve it for the kids.
And that could be, that could absolutely be true. All right, well, folks, that brings us to the end. But on the next episode, police are going to search the apartment and finally sit down with Maria for a face-to-face interview. I'm Gary Mason.
I'm Mike Schuster.
This has been Aftermath of Murder.
The series,
Please join us next week for episode 3.
The Fight.
Today, he told his mother, "I think I know how Ted died."
Him by the hair, put a gun up to his head.
Be sure to check out our webpage at aftermathofmurderseries.com for more information, access to special content, merchandise, and more.
Our writer is Darren Coyle. This has been a Closure AOM production in association with KM Voice.